A porch light in Richmond, California glows through wartime blackout curtains. Inside, a mother stirs canned milk into mashed potatoes, her husband's lunch pail ready for the swing shift. Outside, shipyard whistles and ration lines define the rhythm of the day. Sugar, butter, and meat are scarce, but the will to feed family never runs dry. On the West Coast home front, supper was part math, part hope. These are the foods shipyard families actually ate, born from coupons, gardens, and community kitchens, meals that built the ships and memories that lasted long after victory. For everyone, daily. Before the Victory Gardens sprouted, there was the first shock of rationing. Butter vanished, coffee shrank, and meat became a memory. Kitchens in Richmond, Oakland, and Long Beach rearranged themselves overnight. Mothers read OPA pamphlets like weather reports. The first lesson was adaptation. Feed a hungry shift and growing kids with the same resolve that launched ships into the bay. 1. Victory Garden Stew. The pot starts with what the yard can spare, a handful of carrots pulled with their tops still damp, a hill of potatoes knocked free of soil, charred leaves stacked like pages, one sun-warmed tomato traded over a fence. It's not a recipe, it's a roll call. A little fat if there's any, a bay leaf begged from a neighbor, water enough to make company, and then the quiet patience of a slow simmer. The kitchen fills with a clean, green scent that says the day's work is going to pay off. Coupons don't decide this one. Soil and sweat do. In shipyard towns, gardens became a second shift. Kids weeding before school, grandparents pinching basil, mothers counting jars on the shelf like savings. When the bowls hit the table, everyone can point to something in them they helped grow. It tastes like cooperation and modest triumph, the kind that doesn't need applause, just spoons. 2. Meatless loaf, vegetable loaf. It looks like Sunday, slices like Sunday, but it's Tuesday's wisdom through and through. Mashed beans turn sturdy with breadcrumbs. Onions and carrots bring sweetness. Oats give it the backbone a ration book can't. The mix goes into a loaf tin with a thin swipe of tomato on top, shiny as hope. In the oven, edges set, the center steadies, and the house smells like a promise kept. Women at the factory gate whisper tips. A spoon of canned milk makes it tender. A pinch of sage tricks the nose. When it's sliced, the pieces behave. Neat on the plate, steady in a sandwich for the night shift. No one pretends it's beef. No one needs to. It feeds the same hunger with thrift and pride, the way a patched sleeve still keeps a worker warm. Around the table, kids learn another kind of plenty, enough to go around, enough to pack for later, enough to make tomorrow feel possible. 3. Powdered egg scramble. Morning comes in tins. Powdered milk turns smooth under a whisk. Dried eggs bloom from dust to batter yellow. A skillet waits with the thinnest sheen of fat, just enough to keep things honest. The scramble moves slow, nudged into soft folds, a pinch of pepper if there's any left. Sometimes a handful of chopped chard slips in from the yard. Sometimes it's plain because plain is what the budget allows. No one cheers, but no one goes hungry either. Fresh eggs are for soldiers now. The home front learns to take reliability over romance. Radios murmur headlines. Lunch pails wait by the door. A child decides this is what breakfast tastes like and stops missing what he barely remembers. It's a small ceremony of steadiness. Warm plate, clean fork, shoes laced, bus to catch. On days when sacrifice needs a face, it looks like this pan. Ordinary, dependable, and on time. Ration biscuit. Jam plate flour counted, shortening pinched, leaven measured with a careful hand. The dough comes together with the quiet confidence of someone who's made it 100 times. A quick turn on the board, a press of the cutter, rounds lined like buttons in a pan. They bake fast, edges brown, top soft enough to sigh when split. Jam is less sugar than shine, carrot brightened with peel, berries stretched with patience, a spoonful per biscuit so tomorrow's still got some sweetness left. The plate looks small until you remember it's meant to be repeated. One for now, one warmed again, one tucked into a pocket for the walk. Children lick the tang from their lips and find the day a little lighter. Parents watch crumbs disappear and feel the ledger balance another line. It isn't indulgence, it's morale. A biscuit can't change a war, but it can change a morning. 5. Wartime vegetable soup, canned mix. The best thing about this soup is how it waits for you. A pot of thin broth, a handful of macaroni, a tumble of vegetables from jars lined like trophies, tomatoes the color of late summer, beans with their creases still proud, carrots that kept their promise. It simmers low while the clock forgets who's early and who's late. Shift work doesn't ask the stove's permission. The soup understands. Someone ladles a mug at midnight perched by the gas heater. Someone else eats before dawn, coat already on. The pasta softens the day's edges. The vegetables speak of hot kitchens in July where the future got packed away one lid at a time. It doesn't impress. It reassures. When a tired man comes home to it, the first spoonful says, "You're back. There's enough." When a mother tastes it, she hears every jar pop from months ago and knows the plan worked. In Richmond and Oakland, in little kitchens along Long Beach, this was the bowl that kept the house on its feet. Quiet, repeatable, and kind. 6. Mock chicken fricassee. The pot smells like Sunday dinner, but there isn't a feathered bird in sight. Housewives called it mock chicken, a dish built on memory and imagination. Leftover vegetables, oats, or soy crumbles stand in for meat, simmered in a pale gravy thickened with flour and canned milk. A sprig of thyme, a spoon of margarine, and a quick stir turn what's left into what's longed for. Poultry had flown off ration books and into army kitchens, so the home front learned to make texture and scent do the heavy lifting. When the plate hit the table, no one mentioned the missing chicken. "They just passed the biscuits," said Grace, and gave thanks that the sauce still smelled like comfort. In kitchens from San Pedro to Vallejo, fricassee proved something vital. Even imitation could carry the warmth of home if cooked with the same care. Spam potato hash. The skillet snaps alive as diced potatoes meet cubes of pink spam. Onions follow, hissing their approval. In 10 minutes, the mix is golden and loud with aroma, the kind that drifts out to porches and calls the family in. Spam was the one canned meat you could count on, born from factory lines and wartime need. It didn't spoil, didn't ask questions, and didn't waste a bite. For shipyard workers coming off graveyard shifts, this hash was fast fuel. Protein and salt and starch, all in one pan. Kids called it breakfast for dinner, and the name stuck long after ration books ended. It was the modern face of thrift. Quick, portable, industrial, but still human in its hunger. Every kitchen had its version, some with peppers, others with a fried egg if luck allowed. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough. And enough in 1943 was Victo. Wheatless pancakes. The griddle hums before sunrise. A thin batter of oat or rice flour pours easy, spreading into small, determined circles. They hiss and bubble, turning gold at the edges, kissed with the scent of whatever oil survived the week. Wheat had gone to the troops, so civilians flipped alternatives. Victory cakes, the USDA called them. Housewives pinned government pamphlets above their counters, learning to trade precision for persistence. A dash of corn syrup might sweeten the stack, or maybe a drizzle of diluted jam. Children didn't complain. They just asked for seconds. It wasn't about perfection. It was about participation. Every pancake flipped was a quiet salute to the war effort, a domestic drumbeat of, "We're doing our part." And when the family sat down, maple syrup or not, they still felt rich in warmth. It was proof that pancakes, like people, could adapt and rise again. 9. Victory salad. The crunch came first. Carrots, cabbage, and maybe a few shreds of celery, all tossed with vinegar and a pinch of sugar, if any was left to spare. This was a no-cook supper side, bright and sharp, the taste of resilience in a time when coal and gas needed saving. Housewives wrote in church cookbooks, "Good for morale, keeps well overnight." The vinegar bite cleared the air of ration monotony. The colors brought life back to beige plates. In West Coast kitchens where gardens thrived in year-round sun, fresh vegetables were more than food. They were hope on a plate. Served cold beside a slice of loaf or stew, The victory salad was a reminder that even in a war built on heat and metal, something could still stay crisp, raw, and alive. Every bite was a little rebellion against fatigue, a crunch that said, "We're still here." Source 10, Oleo Margarine Spread. It came in a plain white block sealed inside a plastic pouch with a tiny red capsule. Coloring, they called it. The law said margarine couldn't look like butter unless you made it yourself. So, mothers handed the bag to their children, who pressed and kneaded until the white turned gold beneath their fingers. It was a small act of transformation, a kitchen alchemy that turned lack into luxury. Butter had been claimed by the Army and the Navy, and oleo was what stayed behind, cheap, shelf-stable, and reliable. Spread on toast, melted on vegetables, or stirred into gravy, it did its job quietly. Some swore they could taste the difference, others pretended not to notice. But everyone knew what it meant. Adaptation wasn't just survival, it was participation. Every yellow pat was a gesture of faith in the future, a statement that the home front could still make beauty from constraint. And when the family sat down to eat, that soft gold shimmered like a promise that better times were already on their way. 11. Mock apple pie, cracker pie. The kitchen smells like autumn even though no orchard has been visited. A kettle of sugar syrup warms with cinnamon and a squeeze of lemon, and a handful of plain crackers softens under the pour, turning flaky edges into something surprisingly apple-like. Wartime bakers learned that scent and texture could fool a longing heart. In Richmond row houses and Long Beach bungalows, pies cooled on windowsills not for show, but for morale. Thin crusts batched with care, lattice skipped to save fat, tins reused until the rims went dull. Children leaned in and swore they tasted apples. Mothers let the story stand, because sweetness was a kind of medicine. The trick worked because the mind remembered what the nose suggested: cinnamon, warm syrup, a hint of tartness, and the tongue followed. A slice at the end of a ration-tight supper didn't change the war, but it changed the evening. Laughter came easier, dishes clinked lighter, and the house felt safe for one more night. In shipyard towns, this was victory too. A dessert built from invention, served on chipped plates, shared without apology. It proved that comfort could be conjured, that longing could be eased, and that the home front's greatest ingredient was nerve. 12-carat marmalade sunlight in a jar. That's what mothers called it when they spread a bright orange sheen across toast and told the kids to close their eyes. Grated carrots caught the glow of borrowed citrus peel, saved from a rare orange, traded from a neighbor or collected from canning day scraps, and simmered low until the kitchen smelled like the promise of spring. Sugar ration coupons stretched farther this way. Carrots were plentiful, cheap, and local, while oranges rode trains that didn't always stop. In the long line of wartime substitutions, this one felt less like a compromise and more like a clever wink. You want sunshine? We'll make our own. At breakfast, the marmalade shone against pale biscuits and powdered egg scramble, lifting the whole table with its color. At night, a spoon swirled into tea sweetened the end of a weary shift. Community cookbooks wrote it down with polite brevity. Women in apron circles shared the better details in whispers: how long to simmer when the sheen was right, how to set it by the window just so. The spread carried pride, not pretense. It said that even when the ration book frowned, ingenuity could answer with a smile, and in every scrape of knife across bread was the sound of optimism, laid on thick. 13 victory cake, no butter, no eggs. Candles turned a plain cake into a celebration, and wartime cooks learned how to make it lift without the luxury. Vinegar nudged baking soda into action. Oil stood in where butter once reigned. Cocoa or spice disguised what wasn't there. A single bowl, a wooden spoon, and the quiet courage to serve it proudly. That was the method and the message. Birthday parties didn't stop for rationing. They simply changed shape. Paper hats cut from newspaper, gifts wrapped in saved ribbon, and a cake that rose on chemistry and faith. Children blew out candles in Oakland kitchens while ship horns called from the bay. Grandparents clapped in Richmond flats with blackout curtains drawn. The first slice was tender, even if the frosting was thin or absent. The second slice tasted like gratitude. Recipes traveled fast, across lunch lines, through church bulletins, over factory fences as women traded coupons for cocoa and stories for strength. The victory cake's secret wasn't its substitutions. It was its insistence that joy needed only a preheated oven and a willing heart. In photographs that survived the war, the crumb looks modest and the smiles are huge. That's the measure that mattered. A cake you could count on when supplies said otherwise, carrying birthdays safely through the storm. 14. Liver onions plate. Sometimes thrift didn't wear a disguise. It came to the table with the full force of iron and honesty. Liver onions was the working man's compromise. Pan-fried quick after a long shift, hot gravy catching the drippings, onions softened to sweetness to keep the plate friendly. Organ meats didn't eat up coupons the way steaks did, and butchers on the West Coast still had some to sell when the better cuts marched east. The flavor didn't whisper, it declared, so cooks leaned into technique. A watchful eye on the heat, a brief turn in the pan, a flood of brown gravy to round off the edges. Shipyard hands needed strength more than ceremony. This dish gave both if you accepted its directness. Children came to it slowly. Adults respected it sooner, especially when the ledger was thin. The smell filled small apartments and cramped cottages, a signal that protein had made it through another day. Paired with fried potatoes or a scoop of garden greens, the plate looked honest, almost stern, but it carried a softer truth. The home front could still deliver a warm supper that held its ground. In the tally of necessary meals, this one paid out in quiet endurance and steady steps back to the yard. 15. Dried fruit compote. Evenings asked for gentleness, and compote provided it without argument. Prunes, raisins, and the occasional apricot, treasures from a tin or a jar tucked away, slipped into a pot with water and a little sweet, then simmered until the fruit sighed and the kitchen smelled like dusk. It was a dessert that didn't try to be anything else. Soft, spoonable, and calm. The West Coast had once taken variety for granted. War made every bite feel earned. Compote carried the memory of pre-war fruit markets and the hope of their return. Served warm over a biscuit or plain in a bowl, it made conversation soften and shoulders drop. Mothers liked that it kept. Children liked that it glowed in lamplight. Sometimes a cinnamon stick found its way in. Sometimes the warmth alone did the work. Each spoonful felt like a hand on the shoulder, saying the day had done enough. In neighborhoods stitched together by ship whistles and bus schedules, this small sweetness closed the ledger without guilt. Tomorrow's coupons could rest. Tonight the house held quiet, bowls clicked gently, and the last thing people tasted was the sugar of patience, the kind that stretches across oceans, climbs gangplanks, and waits faithfully for peacetime doors to open. 16. Ration book sandwiches. The hum of the shipyard carried into every lunch break, and out came the ration book sandwiches, thin, modest, but made with pride. Bread was sliced nearly transparent, a trick to stretch each loaf another day. Inside, a leaf of lettuce gave color. The filling could be anything the night before had left behind: mashed beans, chopped Spam, or a spoon of egg substitute salad bound with vinegar and hope. The paper-wrapped bundle wasn't just a meal. It was a badge of contribution. Women on brake lines compared theirs like recipes. Mine's got grated carrot. I saved a bit of bacon grease. For the men on swing shift, these sandwiches stood between exhaustion and another hour at the welding line. The first bite always tasted faintly of the home they'd left behind that morning, the porch light still on, coffee still on the stove. Lunch hour in wartime was short, but these sandwiches made it sacred, a pause for gratitude and a reminder that effort, no matter how humble, fed the victory. 17. Wartime macaroni bake. The oven was never truly off in shipyard neighborhoods. Somewhere on every block a pan of macaroni bake browned under a careful eye. Pasta meant reliability. Canned milk meant innovation. Mothers combined the two in endless variations. Bits of onion, shreds of leftover meat, crumbs toasted crisp on top. When the door opened, steam rolled out carrying the smell of stability. Neighbors shared pans across fences when a husband got called to night shift, or when a new family arrived from Oklahoma looking for work. The dish became the neighborhood handshake, cheap enough to give, hearty enough to fill, even when the milk came from powder and the cheese was half imagination. The result was comfort layered in practicality. After long days of welding and riveting, this casserole came out bubbling, golden, and ready to forgive the world its shortages. You didn't need luxury to build community, just an oven, a casserole dish, and the will to share what you had. 18. Fish loaf with canned tuna. California's coastlines pulled double duty during the war, naval bases by day, canneries by night. From those factories came rows of tuna tins, silver and dependable, stamped with the quiet promise of protein. Housewives learned to stretch them into something that looked like Sunday, a loaf. Mixed with powdered egg, breadcrumbs, and a dash of mustard, it baked into firm slices with edges that browned like roast meat. It was the ocean's answer to rationing, and families by the bay treated it with respect. Served cold the next day, it packed well into lunch tins. Served hot, it took its place beside carrots or macaroni. The taste was faintly briny, a reminder that the Pacific still provided even when the markets didn't. Children called it ocean meatloaf. Adults called it success. It represented everything about California's home front ingenuity, industrial supply meeting domestic need. Every loaf sliced was proof that resourcefulness and coastline could feed both morale and hunger. 19. Cocoa made with powdered milk. Evening came slow after long shifts, and what people wanted most was warmth. Cocoa became the language of comfort. Milk powder turned smooth under the whisk, cocoa darkened it, and a careful spoon of sugar substitute gave balance. The trick was patience, stirring without clumps, waiting until the kitchen smelled like calm. It wasn't luxury, but it pretended well enough. Children sipped from enamel mugs, lips dusted with chocolate. Their parents leaned back, shoulders dropping as if for the first time all day. Powdered milk stretched farther than ration books ever could, and cocoa made it feel like a reward instead of a compromise. Church halls used it at socials, Red Cross volunteers poured it for tired welders, and in boarding houses one pot often stretched across a whole floor. It was cheap, brown comfort, rich in memory if not in ingredients. Some called it the taste of home front victory, ordinary, sweet, and shared before lights out. 20. Wartime potato donuts. Nothing said morale like the smell of frying dough on a cool morning near the docks. The secret was potatoes, mashed, leftover, or planned for. They made the dough tender, stretched the flour, and gave the donuts their faint earthy hardiness. Oil was precious, so each batch was small, fried carefully, watched close. Rolled in sugar when still warm, they gleamed like ration day gold. Churches made them for bond drives. Cafeterias sold them for pennies to fund the Red Cross. Families served them on weekends to remind themselves that sweetness hadn't gone extinct. Kids lined up for seconds, dusted white around their mouths. The donuts didn't need perfection. They needed purpose, and they had it. Every batch was an act of optimism, proof that scarcity could still smell like celebration. Even the shipyard foreman swore the air changed when those donuts hit the fryer. For a few minutes, the war felt far away, suspended in sugar, steam, and the hum of determination. Behind every ship launched in Richmond, Oakland, or Long Beach stood a kitchen table balancing coupons, kids, and courage. These weren't just meals. They were strategies of endurance. Each sandwich, each cup of cocoa, each donut fried against the odds was a declaration. The home front would not break. After the break, we'll visit the victory gardens, canning drives, and community cookbooks that kept California's families fed, proving that resilience was as American as cornbread and coffee. 21. Victory Garden salad with home vinegar. The bowl looked like a flag for the backyard, lettuce still cool from morning shade, ribbons of carrot, radish moons, a handful of chopped green onion, maybe a tomato if the vines cooperated. The dressing came from a brown bottle with no label, home vinegar, sharp and honest, brewed from apple scraps saved in a crock behind the stove. A drizzle, a pinch of salt, a turn of the spoon, and the whole thing woke up. In wartime California, gardens were more than hobbies. They were second paychecks. Families in Richmond and Long Beach turned front yards into rows of greens and apartment windows into box planters. No-cook salads saved fuel, and fresh crunch reminded the mouth that not every good thing came out of a can. The vinegar was the quiet miracle, cheap, made from what most folks would have thrown away, patient as a winter jar shelf. At the table, the salad cut through the sameness of ration plates, brightening loaves and stews. It said out loud that the ground still gave, that neighbors still traded, and that freshness could survive any shortage if someone tended it with care. 2. Community Canning Peaches, Group Day. Canning day started early with bushels stacked along a church hall or a neighbor's yard, the air already sweet with sun-warmed fruit. Women tied on aprons, set kettles going, and found their rhythm. Blanch, peel, slice, jar, repeat. The clink of glass met the hiss of steam. Children carried empty jars like parade batons. Someone kept a ledger of lids and rings so the count would match the stories. Peaches traveled up from the Central Valley by the crate, and when the price dipped or a grower donated, the whole block moved like a single kitchen. Sugar was tight, but the math still worked. Light syrups, careful measure, sharing where it counted. Every jar sealed with a sharp, satisfying pop, a sound that felt like insurance against thin months ahead. By dusk, pantry shelves shone amber. Those jars weren't just dessert for winter. They were proof of cooperation, a savings account you could eat, a kindness you could ladle over cake when times called for celebration. Later, on dark evenings after the swing shift, a spoonful over biscuits could turn a tired house into a hopeful one. Group canning wasn't just about peaches. It was about people who refused to leave each other hungry. 23. Shipyard workers' lunch pail plate. The lunch pail felt heavy because it carried a household's best intentions. Inside, there might be 2 thin sandwiches, one with ration stretch spread, another with a slice of tuna loaf, wrapped in wax paper that would be reused tomorrow. A cut apple or a peach when the season was kind, tucked beside a wedge of carrot sticks, a biscuit from yesterday's pan, ready to soak up anything warm from the cafeteria line. Sometimes a thermos of soup rode along, smelling faintly of tomatoes and macaroni by mid-morning. Everything in that pail had a story. Coupons traded for coffee, a neighbor who slipped an extra onion into the garden basket, a child who got up early to pack it so Mama could catch the bus. At lunch, workers found a spot against a breeze-block wall or under a gantry and opened their pails to the day's quiet ceremony. The food didn't show off. It showed up. It had to be portable, sturdy, and honest, the same traits the yard demanded. A bite of sandwich, a sip from the thermos, a look across to friends doing the same. In that short pause, the home front and the war front touched, and the taste of thrift turned into the strength to finish the sheaf. 24. Sugarless lemonade for bond rallies. On courthouse steps and shipyard lots, a galvanized tub of lemonade sat like a pledge. The mix was tart and straightforward. Lemon juice stretched with plenty of cold water and sweetened just enough with honey, saccharin, or a pinch of whatever sugar could be spared. Volunteers stirred with long spoons, paper cups stacked high. A hand-lettered sign reminded everyone, "Sugar is serving too." Bands played marches, speeches rose and fell. The line for lemonade never ended. Children made faces at the first sip and then asked for more. Adults found the sour clean and bracing, the way commitment sometimes tastes. Sugarless lemonade fit the moment, economical, clear-headed, a little stern, and exactly what the day required. It cooled flushed faces, washed down dust and doubt, and made a crowd feel like a single throat-swallowing hope. Money dropped into bond buckets, cups dropped into barrels for the next event. On posters, Liberty wore armor. In the cup, she tasted like lemons and resolve. People went home from those rallies with dry feet and wet lips, convinced that sacrifice wasn't only measured in metal and men, it was measured in what a community was willing to drink together without complaint, until victory. 3. Cabbage casserole, church potluck. Potluck tables in West Coast church basements sagged with sincerity more than abundance, and the cabbage casserole earned its place near the front. Layers of chopped cabbage, a scatter of onions, a pour of canned milk, and a crust of crumbs or broken crackers made from the ends of bread bags. The pan baked until the top went gold, and the cabbage turned tender, losing its edge and finding its sweetness. It fed a crowd without emptying anyone's pantry. Families arrived with what they could, one dish per household, no judgment attached, and found on those tables an answer to rationing that felt like grace. Many small gifts turning into plenty. The casserole took its warmth from the oven and its meaning from the company. Bowls clinked, children ran underfoot, and someone at a folding table tallied the bond drive receipts beside a stack of hymnals. Second helpings were encouraged, third helpings understood. When a new Shipyard family sat down, still smelling of train smoke. Uncertainty. A square of cabbage casserole could be the first bite of belonging. It tasted like thrift turned tender, like the promise that no one would be left out. And when the last pan went empty, the scraped edges shone like proof. Community had once again turned a little into a lot. Every supper from this era reflects cooperation. One family grew tomatoes, another bartered eggs. Someone else shared a canning lid. From powdered eggs to mock apple pie, every dish held the same ingredient: perseverance. The Shipyard kitchen was a command post of its own, where women planned, substituted, and shared. Wartime California became a classroom in ingenuity, proving that comfort doesn't come from plenty, but from purpose. Each meal was a strategy and a statement. We will not go hungry and we will not give in. Ration stamps became a kind of currency for resilience. Recipes became quiet acts of defiance against fear. The food itself was modest: vegetable loaves, Spam hash, cocoa made from powder. But the meaning ran deep. Supper was proof that home could stay steady, even as the world tilted toward chaos. When the war ended, rationing faded, but its lessons didn't. Shipyard wives passed those recipes to daughters, and those daughters wrote them into church cookbooks and PTA fundraisers. They kept the frugality, the pride, and the patience alive in a new peacetime kitchen. Their hands, once inked with coupon stamps, now measured flour freely, but they never forgot the discipline that built victory from scarcity. If you believe in stories where food equals endurance, where every meal is a memory of resilience, subscribe, share, and help keep this living history alive. Historical best effort. Sources noted in description: wartime cookbooks, OPA pamphlets, USDA bulletins, Shipyard newsletters, oral histories, newspapers. Menus and practices varied by town, season, and family.